Thanks for watching this video. What we're going to show you today is how to assemble a 78 to 82 speedometer and hopefully explain some of the problems that can, or try to explain some of the things that can cause problems with your speedometer. I'm going to put this speedometer together. It's out of, I think, a 1979. And you can see here, this is the first worm and magnet already inserted into the frame. When you do this, if you've got a used a stash of parts to do one of these with, or to fix yours with, or if you've got a donor, you want to make sure you take the whole frame and put your first worm and magnet in it. And the reason I say that is if you try to remove just the bushing's got a little retainer tang made into it. When you try to remove the bushing from the frame, it usually breaks it. You can epoxy them back in. I mean, it just seems like a lot more work than what really needs to be done. Just make sure you clean it up real well, and make sure that your first worm and magnet stays in there nice and tight. You can see this one, when we pull on it, it wiggles a little bit in and out, which is normal. It won't go all the way down to the last ring on the first worm magnet shaft. So that's in good shape. We've got our upper frame, our speed cup, and our lower retainer already pre-assembled. If you look, the speed cup has got a little clip in it, and you can see it right there. There's a little clip, and that clip goes on the shaft. The speed cup shaft has a notch in it, which is right there, and that floats inside of there. You can see this speed cup shaft is broke. The needle, there's no way a needle will fit back on this shaft. This is useless. I'm just using it to show you how it goes in. But that little retainer has to slide into that little groove, and that makes this float over top the first worm and magnet, and there should be no way it should touch. I'm sorry. It floats over top the first worm and magnet, and there's no way that should touch. If you take yours apart, you don't have to if you're working on the first worm and magnet gear, but if you do have to take yours apart, when you go back together, there's a stop tang on the speed cup right there. You see that? And that tang has to be on this side of the retainer plate, because it's the stop. It's the ting you hear when the needle thuds out. You can hear that. That's what makes that noise. So anyway, this is free floating on top of the first worm and magnet head. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to put in the second worm gear. The second worm gear goes in like this and lays down, and you want to make sure it's tight, and I've already inspected the teeth. The teeth are good. This is the third worm gear. This lays in here like this. Now what you've got to do is you've got to take the frame assembly, and you can always tell which side goes where because of this bracket right here, this little shaft that runs down off the plastic housing, because that sits on top the second worm. It sits on top of the second worm gear and keeps it from thrusting or moving outward. And so we've got to set this down in here, and it's kind of tricky because you got to get it all to line up at the same time to get the fall, and it's just not, well, it's really not that tricky, but there we go. Almost there. When everything lines up just right, there we go. It sets right back down inside of there the way it should. And so now what we're going to do, we've got some 3/16 bolts that hold this together. So we're going to put this one in on the side of the frame. And that's all we're going to concentrate on for right now, is the two on the side. We got one there. We got one that goes in the side right there. And you've really got to have a nut driver, a thin-walled nut driver, to get in there on these things, because if you try to use a socket, it's too fat. You'll never get it with a socket, so you just need to get you a small nut driver. Now that that's in there, see, now we can move it. You can hear it tinging. There's no friction. We can go in here and spin the shaft a little bit, and we want to listen for a wear. And we got nothing. Now for us, what we're going to do, we're going to throw it on the calibration machine. We're just going to run it up real quick and listen for noises. And we're going to watch the speed cup, make sure there's no movement. It's a nice smooth movement. There's no way to calibrate it because we don't have a face or a needle on it, but that's a good enough That's good enough. I don't hear any noise that doesn't belong. So we'll set that back down. Now what we would normally do is we could throw the face on it right now and calibrate it. I'm going to show you this because it's visible now. It won't be later. But there's a spring in here, and that's the tensioning spring for the speed cup. And that's also what adjusts the calibration. And so you can move this up for less tension, down for more tension, and that will either slow or speed up your speedometer when you calibrate it to match our machine over there. Now, most people aren't going to have a calibration machine, so if you want the scale, I can tell you the RPMs if you've got a way to generate RPMs if you want to try to calibrate your own speedometer. It's best if you just try to find a shop or somewhere that can calibrate it for you and save you all the grief. So anyway, we've got an intermediate gear over here too, so we want to make sure all that's functioning right. And when I was running it up, I was watching the gears to make sure they're all turning. A common problem, if your odometer quits working and your speedometer is working, you've got a problem in your drive gear. In 1978, General Motors started making the gears plastic, and that was standard, and that was great because what it did, it actually saved the life of the first worm and magnet, because when they made the second worm gear out of steel, these gears would get chewed up when the first worm magnet and bushing failed. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the trip odometer in, and we're going to put the trip reset. Now the trip reset, you have to push it down to get it under just a little bit, and you just preload it like that, and it falls in the right place. Now there's again a 3/16 screw that goes in here. We're going to run that down. So put that 3/16 in. We're going to put this 3/16 in. Now a lot of people ask how to get the knob off the trip odometer, and it's pretty simple. If you look at the bottom, when the knob's on, there's a little retainer. There's a little ear right there, and it catches. And all you have to do is go in there with an old screwdriver. It can't be a new one. It has to be an old one, and push down right here, and that'll release the knob. Be careful not to break the shaft. We have a limited supply of used trip odometer reset housings or knobs or whatever you call it. We don't have very many of them left. Now what you want to do is you want to insert the trip odometer in place, and if you look right here, there's a safety tang, a safety plate on the back. These were put on the speedometers in 78, and that was a tamper plate. And if you break this, these won't stay lined up. So you want to be careful. Do not break that, because I won't sell them to you, and I don't know anybody that will. But you've got them on both the odometer and the trip odometer, and you've got a bar right in here, and that bar is what these little grooves have to line up with that bar. So without the tamper plate on the trip odometer, they'll work. But without the tamper plate on the speedometer, they're designed to fail if it's not there, and they will. And so you got to line that up and slide that in place. And I'm trying to make sure I stay on the camera. And it's usually not that hard. There we go. Okay, so now we've got this in place. And if you look on the shaft right there, there's a groove. Well, that little groove has to line up with this special retainer right here. And that is what actually holds it in place. But you can see right now it's not lining up because the gears, there we go. The gears over here weren't lining up. So I just moved this a little bit, push down on the knob just a little bit, and it'll move. And we want to put the retainer in place. Once the retainer's in place, you've got the groove on the side of the trip odometer. Again, a 3/16 bolt. And I'll get it in a minute. I don't know if you can see. Am I blocking myself? Sort of. Alright, well you can see it like that, I'm sure. And that little retainer is what holds the trip odometer in place. So I got my groove lined up. I got my little nub here that goes through the retainer, so there's no way you can get this in there wrong. Again, you can see in here, right here where my adjustment is as well. That's my calibration adjustment. So we're going to put the speedometer back in place, and we've got to do the same thing. We've got to line up we've got to line up the slots in these fingers with the tangs on here. But you can see there, once it's installed, it's going to miss a couple places, and that's where the tamper plate comes into play. If the tamper plate's broke, then these retainers won't stay where they need to be, and then it'll spin wildly. So you insert it this way, you come back, and you line them up, and then you slide it in place. Now, there's a little retainer right there, and that little retainer goes right here, and that holds the speedometer in place. 85,907 miles and 3/10. We're going to reset the trip just to make sure it's working. Okay, and pretty much that's it. Next, we're going to put the face on it. We did a video on how to get the needles off, so I'll give you a little refresher course on that real quick too. Face goes on, face needle, or face goes on, face screw, they're little black screws. They're almost a black phosphate coating on them. Earlier cars had like a black paint. 882 had a black phosphate coating. And we'll snug those up. Got to remember you're dealing with plastic here, so it's probably not a bad idea to take your time and not over tighten your screws, because you will strip them out. Now, because the speed cup was bad and got interfered with by the first worm and magnet on this gentleman's speedometer, it broke his needle. You can see the end of the needle. Anytime you're in direct drive with the speedometer cable, you're going to have troubles. And that's exactly what happened. So we've got a brand new needle here for him. We're going to put this on. We're going to go up to about 50 miles an hour and just set the needle on there. We're going to gently push and turn. We're going to go about 3 or 4 miles an hour past 0. And that's too far. Okay, good trick. So now we're going to have to go back here on the back side. We're going to have to rotate the cup up just a little bit so we can hold the speed cup. We're going to rotate it to the left some more and pull outward, and that will release it. We're going to have a do-over here. This time we're going to do it again, and we're going to put it about 50, 60 miles an hour. It doesn't really matter. And I overdid it, so I'm going to push downward, and it's just a friction fit. So I'm going to push downward, and I'm going to let up. I'm right below 0. And that's going to be perfect. So next thing we want to do is we want to check the calibration. And you're just going to have to take my word for it. And we're a little fast. So we're going to put some tension in this real quick. And that's not that hard to do, but what we've got is we've got to go in here now and push downward just a little bit. Pretty bad. There we go. And I'm going to move it just a little bit. 1, 2 clicks. So that's actually a total of 3 clicks. So if I over adjust, I can come back and change it. There's 40 and there's 40, 50. We're in good shape now. There's 30. And there's 40. I've got trip odometers moving. My odometer's moving fine. Next thing we got to do is we can go ahead and put the button back on because we're done. And you set that down and it just snaps right in place. I guess if we want to let it run, we can go ahead and put the thing back together. The housing. This would be a complete. You'll really get to see how it goes back together. Or reverse it if you want to take it apart. Speedometer sits in here. Boy, these cars are so nice for pulling the tacks out, because all you have to do is pull this retainer off and the lens off, and you can pull it straight out of the car. A lot easier than the older 7782 cars. I believe this is a 1/4-inch nut driver here, and you just want to put those in. And we've got a real long Allen wrench somewhere. I don't know what I did with it, but the real long Allen wrench makes it real nice for taking the retainer out, or the cover out, because you don't have to worry about hitting the back wall of the housing. And this just sits in here. If you look, there's a little, and that slides in. You got Allen screws go in all the way around, and there should be got one hiding on me. I think there's 6 in here all together. You just want to run these down. They screw down pretty quick. You snug them up. You just want to be careful you don't scratch your housing when you tighten them up. That's why the big T-bar one works better. And in this case, this guy's pretty lucky, because it wasn't a real bad fix, and we had the pieces needed to fix it. So now the lens just slides over. I would advise you to clean your lens. You can see, actually I'll do him a favor and clean the crud off the inside of his lens. Be stupid not to send it out that way, but we're going to put a rag to it here real quick. Now, whenever possible, I'd reuse these original lenses. There's a little bit of an issue. The repro lenses, they will fit and work. Get some glass cleaner here. They will fit and work, but you got to do some finagling with them around this little area right here, and they're not a perfect fit. But right now, that's all we can get, so there's really not a whole lot we can do about it. But if yours is in decent shape, this one's cracked, it's be easy enough for the customer to replace later on down the road if he wants to. And you just set it in there. You got 3 Phillips screws that hold the lens in. And that one's a little bit loose, so you may have a problem out of that later on. Plastic fusion, plastic weld, 2-part epoxy. If your holes are stripped out, fill them up, drill them, re-tap them, run your screws in. It's a quick fix to any ABS plastic hole that's stripped out. About all you can do. These housings, we've got some used housings as well. There you go. Speedometer's fixed, installed, ready to rock and roll. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to shoot us an email. While our sales staff's pretty knowledgeable, they don't really know how to take everything apart and how to put everything back together, so we ask that you don't call them and ask them how to fix a fuel gauge or a speedometer. They're not going to know. If you want to get in touch with us, you're going to need to contact us at support@willcoxcorvette.com. There's 2 L's in Willcox. Don't forget to visit our website. If you go to our website, on the top right-hand corner is a repair section. It's going to be changed to tech. It should say tech help or tech repairs, or we're going to change it. It says repairs right now, and that was something that the new web guys put in place when we redesigned the new site, and so hopefully we'll get that changed real soon. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, and have a great day.